I'm making this video in response to a video Lewis Thomas made in 2017 during the bubble phase of Bitcoin around the interaction between government taxation systems that are currently implemented and Bitcoin privacy coins, and how governments in the future will fund programs such as schools, hospitals, and emergency services, and what other taxation systems may have to be implemented. And I found a couple of issues with his premise for funding these types of programs that we currently have. He talked a lot about public schooling, for instance, was one of his big points. And I think something that he left out was that a large amount of the programs that have been implemented for the past 30 to 40 years in Western countries, particularly England, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, have been financed by debt. And I don't think that they have been sustainable for the past 40 years. I think they've been unsustainable, and that's why a lot of these global currencies will eventually fade away. You look at the future liabilities for these governments in these programs, and they exceed, in some cases, the national GDP, and they become extremely costly. And that's because I think that debt financing and central reserve banking has had a complete effect on changing the way people look at economics and public funding of services. Originally, public schools were only primary schools, so there was a large, almost entire market for high schools privately financed. And so you had good private schools and cheap private schools, and that was the system. This is back when religions ruled the world, essentially, in the 50s and 60s. And I think from there, he kind of loses the perspective relating to what the current financial system's effect has been on public services, and in general private sector services as well, and the ability of private schools to remain financially viable without government funding. And this idea you can extend onto all forms of public services. So, for instance, the World Health Organization, the UN, the UNESCO system of designating different locations. These types of global government bodies are currently financed by debt that governments are taking out, which is selling down the future value of the currency, or you're paying it back, which means that you're having to sacrifice your GDP. So this whole mechanism of most of the large public programs being financed by debt, I think, is a key issue in the culture that Lewis is missing in this video. And I really like his stuff. I think he is right on the fact that big government programs won't go away. But I think a much more interesting thing will be the ability of people to voluntarily hand over their taxes. This is the original system of taxation, it was not mandatory. And I think there will be chaos when these currencies begin to fail in the next 20 years, and it will not be fun. Long term, however, everyone will still remember the systems we have in place and the benefits that they have. So I think increased trade barriers, increased corporate taxes like we had in the old days, and a more hard money economy similar to when we had the gold standard is more likely. There will obviously be different taxes because we do have a higher standard of living now in these countries compared to those times. In that we want to live in a healthier manner. But yeah, I don't think Lewis in that video really understood the effect that banks have on just changing the culture and the global political environment completely with debt financing of certain areas through governments. And buying bonds, for instance, is a classic one that corporate and central banks do to help some countries and hurt others. And Lewis, I'm sure will pick this up, and hopefully if he sees this, he can respond. But I just wanted to put that out there, that Bitcoin and its effect on the global finance system will not be restricted to just finances. There will be a massive impact on how we actually function as a society, and we'll need to look at hard money economies rather than fractional reserve banking economies, where money has this variable value based on how the government is feeling about the economy. So I thought I'd put that out there. Please like and subscribe, dislike if you don't agree, and leave a comment if you have any thoughts. All right, thanks very much.